Hi, I am Autumn Dixon with abalancedsaintofmind.com. If you prefer reading to listening, you can check out this website. I post written versions of my videos for this channel. So this week we're going to be talking about Mosiah chapter 29 through Alma chapter 4, and the dates are May 25th through 31st. What I actually wanted to focus on today was just Mosiah chapter 29, and we're just going to move through that chapter chronologically. And what's happening right now in this chapter, we see King Mosiah, and he is heading towards the end of his reign, and his sons don't want to take over the kingdom, and so he decides that he is going to completely overhaul their entire political system. Up to this point, they've had kings, and now he wants to put it into a political system where they have judges. And it gives a lot more freedom to the people, and he explains his reasoning. Now, the reason I want to talk about this chapter, we live in a country right now that is highly, highly polarized. There's a lot of political turmoil. And here we see right now King Mosiah approaching a very new political situation. And we can actually learn a lot from his example. And so that's kind of why I wanted to focus on Mosiah chapter 9. So we're just going to read some verses and pull out some principles about how we can approach our political environment in the world today with the same attitudes that King Mosiah had. So, to start out, we are doing Mosiah chapter 29, verses 8 and 10. Verse 8. It says, "Now I say unto you, let us be wise and consider these things. For we have no right to destroy my son, neither should we have any right to destroy another if he should be appointed in his stead." Verse 10. "And now let us be wise and look forward to these things and do that which will make for the peace of this people." So two times Mosiah asks us to be wise. And it's associated with two phrases. The first verse, wisdom is associated with consider these things. And in the second verse we read, wisdom is associated with look forward to these things. So when Mosiah was looking forward to these things, he actually did not hesitate to delve into the negative consequences that could happen from different choices, like different paths that he could take with the situation before him. So he talks about I could appoint another king, but what if my son returns to his old ways and he becomes wicked and he decides he wants the kingdom, and then it starts this big old war and we destroy lots of souls? He said it's a bad idea. But what I wanted to point out is he didn't hesitate to think about the negative consequences that could come from actions that could be taken with either path. Something that is so important for us to do, and this kind of seems like a no-brainer. It's going to seem silly that I would even bring this up, but we have to take our own political opinions that we have been entrenched in, and we need to think about potential negative consequences that could come from them. And the main reason for doing that isn't even necessarily to change your opinion. The reason we need to do that is so that we can work together better in our country for positive solutions. Now, I didn't want to get into any specific political issues. I want to keep this neutral, and so instead I came up with an example that still teaches my principle, but it stays away from specific political issues. So let's say we have two parents and their child is moving quickly down a path that they are nervous about. This child is falling in with some bad friends that have some bad habits, and they are very worried about this child. Well, mom is really, really worried, and she wants to ground this child, keep this child away from those negative influences, and protect this child from this path and the addictions that could potentially come because of it. She's doing everything she can to protect this child and pull this child back. Now, on the other hand, we have dad. And dad is worried that if they push this child too far, if they just immediately cut this child off from those friends, that the child will dig in their heels and push back even harder and fall in with these friends even faster. Now, it's really, really easy to see that in this situation, both mom and dad have the child's best interest at heart. They both obviously love their child and want what's best for their child. However, if we were to take the current political climate and apply it to this situation, we would see mom, and she would be really frustrated with dad because dad seemed like he didn't care enough, and he was apathetic. He didn't care what was happening to their child and was just kind of like, oh, pushing it off, it's going to be fine. Mom is worried, and she's worried that dad doesn't care. On the other hand, we see dad, and he is trying to get mom to relax, that there are better other solutions. They're essentially in their paths to try and protect this child. They start to decide that they're on different teams when that is not the case at all. If they were to sit down and think about their own opinions, oh, well, maybe there are some negative consequences that can come from this. Maybe mom thinks, oh, well, maybe this will push our child away. Or if dad thinks, oh, well, maybe if we don't act fast enough, it'll be too late. If they're both willing to consider negative consequences that come from their particular solutions, it will be a lot easier for them to come together and come up with a good solution. And I can promise you, because of the world we live in, no matter what political opinion or party you back, whatever it is, there are negatives to it. There are positives to it. There's going to be a right decision, right? But there will always be negative consequences as well. And the sooner we're able to come to that conclusion, the sooner we can work all together to come up with the best solution. Next verse, we have verse 18. So Mosiah is kind of teaching his people about why he wants to move to the reign of judges. This is what he says: Yea, remember King Noah, his wickedness and his abominations, and also the wickedness and abominations of his people. Behold, what great destruction did it come upon them, and also because of their iniquities they were brought into bondage. So the reason I actually wanted to bring up this verse, it doesn't directly teach a principle in this verse, but if you think about it, King Noah was the son of King Zenith, right? And King Zenith taught his people to look to the Lord and trust in him. When the Lamanites were coming to battle, King Noah did the complete opposite. And what did we see? We saw that his people became wicked and fell into bondage. What I wanted to pull out of this is that it took one generation. It only took one generation for the people to fall into wickedness and fall into bondage. And the reason I pull this out is not to scare anybody, but I pull this out because it is so important that we get involved. It's difficult. Sometimes it's a very contentious political world, but it is important that we get involved in our communities. It's so important that we stick up for our freedoms, our rights, for sticking up for other people. It's important. Now, when I say getting involved, I don't necessarily mean jumping on Facebook and commenting on every political post. Sometimes that might be an appropriate decision, but there are far better ways to get involved. There's a million different ways to get involved, so I'm not going to delve into that because we all have different situations and different amounts of time to allot to political whatever it is. Instead, I'm just going to say it's important that we get involved. Okay, next verse. This is verse 20. And so this is King Mosiah. He's still talking about the people that came from King Noah. It says, But behold, he, speaking of the Lord, behold, he did deliver them, because they did humble themselves before him. And because they cried mightily unto him, he did deliver them out of bondage. And thus doth the Lord work with his power in all cases among the children of men, extending the arm of mercy towards them that put their trust in him. And so this verse is a great comfort. I really, really like politics. I have a love-hate relationship with politics. Sometimes I love it, sometimes I hate it. And sometimes it scares me to death. When you get too involved in it, you see that there is problems going on in our world today. It can be scary, it can be depressing. But this verse teaches us that if we trust the Lord, if we humble ourselves, and I think that is so important to humble ourselves and ask him what he thinks we should be doing. If we humble ourselves and trust him, he's going to deliver us. Jesus Christ already overcame the world, and he can help us do so as well. And so whenever I get really nervous, I pray for two things. I pray that our freedoms will be preserved, and I pray that I will know how to protect my family. We know things are going to get worse as we get to as we get closer to the second coming, but we can trust the Lord. It doesn't necessarily have to be scary because he is on our side. Okay, next verse, and this verse is actually one of the main reasons that I wanted to share this message. It's verse 26, still in chapter 29 if you're following along and forgot what chapter we're in. So, verse 26, it says, "Now it is not common that the voice of the people desireth anything contrary to that which is right, but it is common for the lesser part of the people to desire that which is not right. Therefore, this shall ye observe to do, and make it your law, to do your business by the voice of the people." So, the actual main thing that I wanted to pull out of this verse, I'm going to read it one more time. It says, "It is not common that the voice of the people desireth anything contrary to that which is right." It's common for the lesser part of the people to desire something unrighteous. And the reason that I pull this out is because if you think about these people that were in this political climate in Mosiah's time, some of them may have still been desiring a king. They were comfortable with the idea of a king. And when we really think about these people, were they desiring wickedness? Did they want to be brought into bondage? No. They wanted what's best for their people, just like everybody else. However, it's not really this verse isn't talking about one side or the other. What it's talking about is that people, like a majority of people, desire what is right. It is absolutely essential that we recognize that our political rivals have the same righteous desires that we do. Those righteous desires include making a better country and being kinder and taking care of people. We may have different methods of how we want to get to that point, but it is so imperative that we recognize that they have the same righteous desires that we do. When we demonize the other side of the political spectrum, a few things happen. One, you don't sleep very good at night because you're frustrated. Two, we often can become entrenched in self-righteousness, thinking that we have the moral superiority, and that is a major problem for progress. Third thing that can happen is when you start to take on that attitude, the only thing it does is it causes your political opponents to dig in their heels further, and then we don't get anywhere. It just polarizes the nation farther. And in my opinion, polarization is one of the most dangerous things occurring in our country today because it is keeping us from working together for a better nation. I'm going to reiterate it one more time. We have to stop believing that people on the opposite side of the political spectrum of us are bad. We have to believe that they have the same righteous desires that we do. Mosiah said it best, right? It is uncommon for the larger amount of people to want something contrary to that which is right. Okay, last verse that I want to talk about. It is verse 34. So what is happening right now, just in this little thing that Mosiah is sending out to his people? Mosiah is talking about how hard it was to be a righteous king and how everything fell on him and how badly he wanted to do what was right. And so we're just going to jump in right there. Verse 34, and it says, "And he told them that these things ought not to be, but that the burden should come upon all the people, that every man might bear his part." Okay, so Mosiah is talking about how the responsibility should fall on each and every individual. that can seem kind of scary, but it should actually be a comfort to us. The more I think about it, the more it's a comfort to me. When I look at what's happening in our nation, there are a lot of leaders that aren't doing what's right. There are some leaders that are doing what's right, and there's a ton of people in the middle. However, the true, progression of our nation is going to fall on each and every individual. When you look around and you see violence, or you see poverty, or you see ominous futures, it is empowering to believe that you can make a difference. It is empowering to think about what would happen if each individual realized the power they had to make our country great. We live in a fallen world. We live in a world that no matter how many laws we create, evil will never be done away with. In fact, the closer we get to the second coming, the worse it's going to get. We cannot legislate away evil. If we want to eradicate evil to the furthest degree possible, we have to recognize that it is going to fall on us in our homes, in our communities. We have to recognize our power. I want to give you a specific example. A couple years ago, I accidentally came across a TED Talk, and it was given by a young woman who used to be part of the Westboro Baptist Church. Now, if you're not familiar with that church, they are often shown protesting quite angrily. And she talked about how she was able to break away from the church. And surprise, it didn't happen because the government legislated something. Instead, it happened because she actually got on the internet to go and spread hate to other groups of people who didn't believe the same as she did. She got on there to be angry and hate them and tell them that they were wrong and going to hell. And something very miraculous occurred. And it was that these groups of people, I think she specifically actually mentioned gay people, came back to her with love. And they started to sincerely ask her about her beliefs. And because they did that, it made her pause long enough to realize that these people were not evil, and it changed her heart. Now, imagine if these people had gotten up in arms and defended themselves. Even if they were right, no one deserves like another person getting on the internet to yell at you and be hateful, right? We don't need to be doing that. These people may have been very justified if they had attacked her back. However, because they chose to be kind, they changed this woman's life. She stepped away from all of that hate and embraced a new life. When we realize that we have that same power to reach out in kindness, we will be able to change everything in our country. It will come down to each and every individual. It won't happen at the federal level. It won't happen at the state level. It will happen with us. I am so very grateful that Heavenly Father has put us in the places that He did. I'm grateful to live in a country where the restoration was able to happen. I'm grateful that I live in a country where I can be whatever I want to be. I am grateful that the Lord prepared this land to bring about His righteous purposes. And I say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.